There's a sound you've heard your whole life. It starts soft, a low hiss against glass or against leaves or against the dirt outside a door you can't quite close all the way. Then it grows, steady, relentless, the kind of rain that doesn't threaten to stop. You know the feeling it creates, that strange combination of being trapped and being safe at exactly the same time. Here's what almost nobody has ever asked: where did that feeling come from? Because you didn't invent it, neither did your parents, neither did anyone alive today. That feeling is ancient, and the story of where it comes from reaches back further than cities, further than language, further than anything we usually call history. Roughly 300,000 years ago, a group of early humans woke up to the same sound: rain on stone, rain on bark, rain pooling in low places, turning the ground soft, making every familiar path uncertain. And just like that, the day changed. The hunt was off, the foraging was off, movement was risky, exhausting, possibly deadly in the cold, so they stayed, together, probably close to fire if they had it, pressed against rock if they didn't. And here's the question nobody thinks to ask: what did they actually do? Not the version from textbooks, where ancient humans are reduced to tools and bones and cave paintings with no one behind them, but the real question, hour by hour: what happened inside that shelter when the rain didn't stop? The answer changes something about how you understand yourself. The first thing that happened was simple: they talked. Not in the way we talk now, with the full machinery of language. Early humans had communication that was still developing, still finding its shape. But sound, expression, gesture, imitation, these had been building for hundreds of thousands of years. Rainy days were not quiet. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, people whose daily lives most closely resemble our ancestors, have found something consistent. When bad weather forces a group indoors, conversation explodes. Stories emerge: complaints, jokes, imitations of animals, reenactments of yesterday's hunt. The group, suddenly pressed together with nothing urgent to do, starts processing its shared experience out loud. Robin Dunbar, the British anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, spent years studying why humans evolved language at all. His conclusion was striking. Language didn't evolve primarily to share information about food or danger. It evolved to maintain social bonds inside larger and larger groups, to talk about people, to gossip, to speculate, to tell stories. Rain gave them time to do exactly that. And something happened during those hours of forced closeness that we still feel today. Bonds deepened. There's a concept in psychology called the mere exposure effect. The more time you spend near something or someone, the more familiar and trustworthy they become to your nervous system. Shared confinement, shared discomfort, shared waiting, these experiences wire people together in ways that easy, comfortable days never quite manage. The rainy day wasn't wasted. It was doing invisible social work. But there's another layer to this that goes even deeper. At some point during those long hours, someone started making something. Maybe it was a stone tool, shaped more carefully than usual because there was finally time. Maybe it was a pattern pressed into clay. Maybe it was just a line scratched into rock with no clear purpose, the first impulse towards something we would eventually call art. The oldest known human art wasn't made during seasons of abundance. It wasn't made while the hunting was good and the days were long. The caves of Lascaux, the handprints at Chauvet, the geometric engravings found in South Africa dating back 75,000 years, these weren't created by people with nowhere to be. They were created by people with time, unexpected time, forced stillness. Rainy days may have been the original creative studio. And here's where the science gets strange in the best way. Psychologists have studied what happens to human creativity when people are slightly bored. Not deeply bored, not completely unstimulated, but the specific mental state that happens when the usual demands of survival go quiet and the mind begins to wander. In 2014, researchers at the University of Central Lancashire published a study in which participants who were forced to complete a boring task first something like copying numbers from a phone book, performed significantly better on creative tasks immediately afterward. Their minds, given nothing urgent to process, had started generating unexpected connections, new combinations, novel ideas. The default mode network. That's what neuroscientists call the system in your brain that activates when you're not focused on anything specific. For a long time, scientists assumed this network was basically idle background noise between real tasks. Then they started studying it more carefully, and they found something that reframed how we understand the human mind. The default mode network is where imagination lives, where self-reflection happens, where you simulate future events, reconstruct past ones, and build your model of other people's inner lives. Far from being idle, it's one of the most metabolically active regions of the brain. And it turns on fully when the outside world goes quiet. Rain quieted the outside world. This is why the feeling of a rainy day still does something to you. Your brain recognizes it. Thousands of generations of ancestors used that sound as a signal, not of danger, not of loss, but of permission. Permission to slow down, permission to turn inward, permission to think in a different way. Your nervous system inherited that signal. But there's something else ancient humans did during long stretches of rain that modern research has only recently started to appreciate. They slept differently. In the modern world, sleep is something we try to control, a fixed block, a schedule. Before electricity changed everything, human sleep was far more flexible. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, studying indigenous groups who had not adopted modern sleep patterns, found that sleep happened in waves, short and long, shaped by temperature, season, safety, and crucially, weather. Rain meant cooler temperatures. It meant the fire was more important. It meant sound carrying differently, both masking threats and signaling them from further away. In cold rain, the body naturally wants to conserve heat, which means staying still, bundled, close to others. Napping was not laziness. It was thermal regulation. It was immune function. It was the brain consolidating whatever had been learned in the hours before. Rainy days may have been the original recovery days, the days when the body did the repair work that constant movement never allows. And then something social happened: conflict resolution. Here's the problem with keeping a group of early humans in close quarters for an extended period of time. Tensions rise, old grievances resurface. Small annoyances that were manageable when everyone was spread across miles of landscape become unbearable when you're sharing 12 square feet of dry space. Every hunter-gatherer society ever studied has developed sophisticated mechanisms for dealing with this. Humor is one. The ability to defuse tension through laughter appears to be a universal human behavior with deep evolutionary roots. Storytelling is another, redirecting collective attention toward a shared narrative rather than an interpersonal conflict. And then there is what psychologists now call emotional disclosure, the act of saying what you're actually feeling out loud to someone who listens. James Pennebaker, a psychologist at the University of Texas, spent decades studying what happens when people verbalize their inner experiences. His findings were remarkably consistent. People who talked or wrote openly about difficult emotions showed measurable improvements in immune function, mood, and long-term mental health. The act of putting experience into words appears to do something structural to the nervous system. It reduces the physiological burden of carrying unsaid things. Ancient humans didn't know Pennebaker's research. They didn't need to. They talked. They vented. They worked things out in the language they had, however incomplete it was compared to ours. The rain forced proximity. Proximity forced disclosure. Disclosure built trust. And trust is what makes a group survive. This is the thing modern life often misses about what rain once meant. We treat bad weather as an obstacle, a disruption to a schedule, something to be defeated by a good app or a better umbrella. But for most of human history, weather was not an obstacle to life. It was part of the rhythm of life. Summer and winter, wet and dry, moving and resting, hunting and recovering. The pause was never accidental. It was structural, built into the way the world worked. and human psychology evolved inside that rhythm. There is a reason so many people feel something unexpected when a storm rolls in, a kind of relief under the inconvenience, a loosening of some invisible obligation, a permission appearing from nowhere to stop. That isn't weakness, it isn't nostalgia, it's memory, not personal memory, something older, cellular, inherited across hundreds of thousands of years of the same sound on the same kind of morning. Researchers studying restorative environments, spaces and experiences that genuinely replenish human attention and mood have found that natural settings with reduced demands, predictable ambient sound, and low stimulation consistently produce psychological recovery. They called it attention restoration theory. The idea is that directed attention, the kind required by modern tasks, gradually depletes, and certain environments allow it to refill. Rain is almost perfectly calibrated to produce this effect. The sound is complex enough to mask irritating noise, but predictable enough not to demand attention. The light shifts, the air changes, the usual social obligations become physically impossible. You are not available, the world has made you unavailable. And something in your brain, something very old and very specific, recognizes this and relaxes. Maybe this is why certain memories feel different when they happen in rain. A conversation with someone you loved, a long afternoon with nowhere to go, the particular texture of a day that refused to be productive and somehow became significant anyway. Those moments feel different because they were allowed to be different. The pressure of ordinary life receded. The brain turned inward. Bonds deepened. Something was made or said or understood that never quite happens under blue skies and bright obligation. Ancient humans didn't need science to understand this. They lived it, season after season, generation after generation. The next time the rain comes in and doesn't stop, and something in you shifts slightly, a kind of quiet settling, an unexpected permission. That feeling isn't yours alone. It belongs to everyone who ever waited out a storm.